All right, so picture this. You're in a crowded movie theater. Lights are down, everyone's engrossed in the film, and suddenly the fire alarm blares to life. Smoke starts billowing in. What's your first instinct?
Make a beeline for the exit, or maybe freeze up, try to make sense of what's
I
happening.
think I'd probably freeze for a second. It's that, wait, is this real
Mm,
moment, right?
absolutely. And that split-second hesitation is way more common than you might think. It's actually a key part of how we react in disasters, which is exactly what we're exploring today.
So we're diving deep into Amanda Ripley's book, The Unthinkable, to uncover the hidden survival personality that emerges in a crisis.
We'll be drawing on incredible firsthand accounts, survivors, experts, researchers, all kinds of folks, to really get a grasp on how our instincts, the ones we don't even think about, can both help us and sometimes hold us back in a crisis.
And hopefully learn something along the way, something that might help us make better choices if we ever find ourselves in a similar situation.
Couldn't agree more.
So where do we start?
Well, Ripley kicks things off with a pretty gripping story. Ileazano, who survived both the 1993 and 2001 World Trade Center attacks, and her experience really highlights this thing called normalcy bias.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Normalcy bias. Break that down for me.
Basically, it's our brain's tendency to try and fit unexpected events, really shocking things, into our everyday understanding of how the world works.
So even when something completely out of the ordinary happens, our brains are like, nope, can't be that, must be something more normal.
Exactly. And with Zano, she was actually in the World Trade Center during the 1993 bombing, so she'd experienced a terrorist attack there firsthand. But even with that experience, when the plane hit the tower in 2001, her first thought was, oh, this must be a terrible accident.
Wow. So even having lived through something similar before, that normalcy bias still kicked in. It really shows how powerful it is.
Absolutely. And while it's a natural human reaction, it can be pretty dangerous in a crisis. That delay, even just a few seconds, could be critical. Zano herself waited precious minutes before starting to evacuate.
Makes you think, how many other people were doing the same thing, trying to rationalize what was happening while the situation was rapidly getting worse?
A lot of people, probably. And it really makes you question the whole mass panic thing we often see in movies.
Oh, right. The classic stampede for the exits.
Right. But Zano actually describes a very different scene as she made her way down the stairwell. She talks about an eerie calm, people were orderly, even helping each other out.
It's almost counterintuitive. In the face of such danger, you'd expect chaos, but instead, there's this collective sense of purpose.
It seems so. And it's not just Zano's account. Studies have actually shown that in many disasters, panic is not the default response. People often act with a surprising amount of composure, even kindness.
So knowing that most people will likely stay calm and try to figure things out could actually be reassuring in a crisis.
Absolutely. And that's something to remember. That said, denial isn't limited to those initial moments of a disaster.
Right, it can linger.
Exactly. Ripley also shares the story of Patrick Turner, a man who refused to evacuate for Hurricane Katrina.
Okay, so he was facing a massive hurricane and decided to stay put.
You see, Turner had weathered previous hurricanes without evacuating, and in his mind, Katrina was just another storm. His personal experience overshadowed the very real danger, even though he had the means to leave.
It's like he couldn't fathom the possibility of things being different this time.
And there's another layer to it. Turner absolutely hated disrupting his routine. Even in the face of a Category 5 hurricane, the comfort of the familiar outweighed the potential danger.
Wow. These stories really highlight the human element in disaster response, right?
Yeah.
How our individual experiences, our perceptions can shape our choices even when the facts point in a different direction.
It's this fascinating interplay between logic and emotion. And it leads us to some really interesting concepts. You've heard of extremistan and mediocristan.
Ring a bell, but I'm not sure I could explain them. Refresh my memory.
It's from Nassim Taleb's work. He argues that in mediocristan, things are pretty predictable, like cause and effect. You flip a coin, you get heads or tails. But then there's extremistan, where risks are, well, more extreme. Unpredictable. Think like global pandemics or financial crashes. Stuff that can have massive, unforeseen consequences.
So you're saying our brains, which evolved to deal with the more predictable risks of mediocristan, are kind of struggling to keep up with the crazy, unforeseen dangers of extremistan.
It's a compelling theory, isn't it? And it makes you wonder.
How equipped are we really to handle these massive, unpredictable events?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And one we'll definitely delve into further. But first, It really highlights the gap between what we fear and what actually poses the greatest risk to us.
Yeah, it's like, logically, I know flying is safer than driving, but I still get those pre-flight jitters.
Think about it. What's more likely to kill you? A shark attack or heart disease?
Heart disease, obviously.
Yeah.
But sharks are definitely more, well, dramatic.
Bingo. We tend to overestimate those dramatic sensationalized risks. Terrorist attacks, plane crashes, shark attacks, things that make headlines.
While completely underestimating the everyday risks that are statistically more likely to get us, like heart disease, car accidents, stuff like that.
Exactly. It's like we're hardwired to fear the things that make for a good story, not necessarily the things that pose the greatest actual threat.
Okay, so it's not just the headlines then. We were talking earlier about Patrick Turner, the guy who refused to evacuate for Hurricane Katrina. His personal experience with a previous hurricane really skewed his perception of the danger.
Absolutely. That negative experience, the traffic, the inconvenience, it all overshadowed the very real danger of staying put.
So how do we reconcile those personal experiences with the reality of, statistics and stuff? How do we make sure we're not letting our emotions completely cloud our judgment?
Well, for starters, it helps to be aware of our own biases, like the Lake Wobegon effect, for example.
The Lake Wobegon effect.
Yeah, remember that fictional town where all the children are above average?
Oh, right. Well, the Lake Wobegon effect describes this tendency we have to overestimate our own abilities and underestimate our vulnerability to risks, even common ones.
So it's that classic, it won't happen to me thinking, even when statistically it very well could.
Exactly. And while a healthy dose of optimism is never a bad thing, when it comes to risk assessment, a bit of realism can go a long way.
It's like knowing you're not invincible, even to everyday risks, can help you make smarter choices.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
All this talk about risk and fear, it makes me wonder, what actually happens in our bodies when we're confronted with danger?
That's where Ripley's research takes a really fascinating turn. She dives into the physiology of fear through the experience of Dennis Avalos, a diplomat taken hostage during a Colombian embassy siege. Okay, hostage situation. Talk about high stakes. What happened?
Well, when the shooting started, Avalez's body went into full-on fight-or-flight mode.
I can only imagine the adrenaline rush. But what does that actually look like physically? I mean, what's happening inside his body?
Well, for starters, his heart rate and blood pressure spiked. Stress hormones flooded his system. It's this primal response designed to help us survive.
But it's got to come with some side effects, right?
Oh, absolutely. The body prioritizes strength and speed, but things like complex thinking, fine motor skills, they take a hit.
So you might be able to suddenly lift that car off your trapped friend, but also forget how to use your cell phone to call 911.
Exactly. It's all about survival in the moment. Avales also described experiencing distortions of time and perception, things we see in movies all the time.
Time slowing down, tunnel vision, that kind of thing.
Precisely. It's like the brain is trying to process so much information so fast it just can't keep up. So it narrows its focus, honing in on the immediate threat.
It sounds terrifying, but I guess it's ultimately designed to help us survive, right? By focusing on the immediate threat and blocking out everything else.
That's the idea. These physiological changes, while sometimes disorienting, can help us react quickly, even endure pain.
It makes you wonder, though, is fear always a bad thing? Can we actually use it to our advantage somehow? It's a fascinating question. Can we train ourselves to not, completely lose it when things go sideways, to kind of stay level-headed?
Well, Ripley actually delves into that exact question. She introduces us to Jim Cirillo, a legendary NYPD officer and gunfight expert. He was all about the power of mental training.
So like mentally rehearsing for a crisis, is that really a thing? Can you actually prepare for something like that?
Cirillo was convinced that by visualizing yourself navigating a dangerous situation calmly and effectively repeatedly over and over, you could essentially program your subconscious to react better in a real crisis.
So it's like creating a mental blueprint for how you want to respond under pressure.
Precisely. And there's actually some science to back it up. Research on optimal performance under stress shows that there's this survival zone, a sweet spot really, where your heart rate's elevated enough to sharpen your senses, but not so high that you panic and freeze up.
So it's that balance between being alert and ready, but not totally freaking out.
Exactly. And training, whether it's through visualization, simulations, or even real-world exposure to stressful situations, can actually help us expand that survival zone.
Giving us more wiggle room, so to speak, when things get rough.
Exactly.
Okay, so that makes sense for, police officers, firefighters, people who deal with high-stress situations regularly. But for the average person What are some practical things we can do to kind of, I don't know, manage fear?
Well, Ripley suggests a couple of things. One is practicing visualization techniques, imagining yourself calmly navigating a specific emergency. Like, what would you do if a fire broke out in your home? Like a mental fire drill.
Oh, that's a good idea. Sort of play it out in your head beforehand.
Exactly. Another thing is just being familiar with your surroundings, knowing where the exits are, where the fire extinguishers are, first aid kits, that kind of thing.
Because in those first few critical seconds, knowing what to do could make all the difference. It's like that saying, luck favors the prepared.
Absolutely. And if you're looking for something a little more hands-on, you could consider self-defense classes, wilderness survival training, or even public speaking. Anything that exposes you to safe forms of stress.
To kind of build up that resilience muscle.
Exactly. It's not just about specific skills, but developing that overall mental and emotional resilience, the ability to stay calm, think clearly, and act decisively under pressure. And that's invaluable no matter what life throws at you.
So we've covered a lot today: denial, the physiology of fear, the power of training. What's the one big takeaway you hope listeners walk away with? What's the main message here?
Well, for me, it's that we're not powerless. We're not just victims of our circumstances. Our instincts are powerful, and by understanding them, by being aware of our own biases and how our bodies react, we can actually learn to use them to our advantage, to make better choices in any situation, not just disasters.
It's about empowerment then, about taking control of our own survival narrative, so to speak.
That's a great way to put it. And, Ripley leaves us with a great question to ponder. If you could train your survival personality, what aspect would you focus on strengthening? Your ability to stay calm, your decision-making skills, your physical preparedness. It's something to think about.
Yeah, definitely some food for thought. This deep dive has been eye-opening. I've learned a lot. And for anyone listening who wants to learn more, there are so many great resources out there: books, websites, courses. It's all about taking that first step.
Exactly. It's a journey of self-discovery and empowerment. The more we understand about ourselves, the better equipped we'll be to face whatever life throws our way.
That's a great note to end on. And that wraps up our deep dive into the world of survival instincts. We hope you found it insightful, and maybe, just maybe, it's giving you a little more confidence in your own ability to navigate the unexpected. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and stay resilient.